Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so of course, Jimmy Butler, man, get well soon, come back strong. Went down with the torn ACL, I believe it is. The knee injury was pretty nasty. It happened against his old team, Miami. Ironically enough, when he tore his knee, it was against that same team in that same building. They were wearing the same jerseys, both teams. Just weird omen type stuff, man. Swaggy P said on Gil's Arena, he thinks people ain't living right. I'm like, man, as a person who believes in some spiritual stuff, I wouldn't necessarily rule it out looking at those things. Those type of coincidences are a little strange, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know who's doing what, but with all this Jonathan Kuminga stuff, I don't know, man. That is not minor. That's not a minor injury, and for it to happen in that way, it's extremely, extremely weird to me. But just the same, I mean, you got to move on if you're the Golden State Warriors. I know people are calling out the Golden State Warriors because they've come out and essentially said, yo, we want to move Jimmy. I don't know if they've actually said this, but it's rumored that they have said that they are going to try to move this contract. It's $54 million for 2 years on a 36-year-old player with a bum knee. So you have to ask yourself, who would actually want to make a trade for that contract? Who would think that makes any damn sense? And initially, on my first reaction is, Golden State Warriors are high. No one's going to want that. There's no one that would want that. But then I asked myself that question again. I said, is there someone who has a bad enough contract or set of circumstances to where they don't care that Jimmy Butler circumstances as they are? They just want to get off of a long contract to a player that ain't about to play like that for them, or ain't necessarily that they be locked into that contract to the point where Jimmy on a 2-year deal looks better than whatever the hell that is. And I realized that there may be a team or two where those circumstances might be the case. Maybe a team or two. I was like, yo, man, because you know, not to rehash, but like, there's no reason under normal circumstances for anyone to take Jimmy Butler on a bum knee. He's going to be out for the rest of this season. He's likely going to miss a portion of next season. He's 36 years old. He's making $54 million per year. No one in their right mind under normal circumstances would have any interest in that. And it's very easy to write that off as something like that can't be done. But when you look over at certain teams like Philadelphia and Memphis, those are the two teams that came to mind. Maybe even Portland, although Portland's timeline is a little tricky because Dame is expected to come back next season. But Philly specifically with that Paul George contract. Paul George and Eric Gordon match for Jimmy Butler. And if I'm Philadelphia, if I could find a taker to get that Paul George contract off of my books, I'll do it. And you know Jimmy played for the Philadelphia 76ers. It was a place he probably shouldn't have left in the first place. You don't care about Jimmy Butler specifically if you're Philadelphia. What's attractive is the fact that that's going to be an expiring contract next year. As to where Paul George, that contract's going to be on tap for the next 4 or 5 years. Now, if you're the Golden State Warriors, the idea is to bring yourself something that you could potentially tell people is win now. And Paul George has been playing better ball this season. His contract is horrible, but you don't care about that because what you want to do is just have stuff in place that can be accused of being win now, so that you can excuse yourself the ability to hold on to Steph Curry and Draymond Green. For the Golden State Warriors, keeps them on the same timeline, gives them a wing player that can particularly hit shots, maybe even play a little defense depending on what type of shape he's in. I don't know, man. I'm not a believer in Paul George, but he's playing better right now than he has in 2 or 3 years. And this is the best time to try to trade him if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, because he actually looks like he can contribute. And if you go the Golden State Warriors and you need to have an active, able-bodied player with a win-now timeline, like I said, I don't think there's going to be too many people that are willing to do that. But Philadelphia with Paul George would be willing to. Now, I could argue Golden State would be better kicking this timeline down the curb instead of bringing on the albatross contract that is Paul George. But I don't think Golden State really cares if it can actually win. They just want to be able to write it off as saying they tried to win and tried to keep Steph Curry surrounded by stuff that's on the win now timeline, so that Steph Curry doesn't bolt. And so this might be a situation where this might fit both teams. Both teams might be willing, within their specific circumstances, to be desperate enough to take on each other's garbage. They might be. If I'm Philadelphia, I'm doing this right away. You're trying to tell me that I get off the Paul George contract? Jimmy Butler could be hurt. Jimmy Butler could come back. Jimmy Butler cannot come back. He's expiring next year. Best case scenario, we rehab him, have him back by next December, have him looking pretty good, and trade him as an expiring contract on a $54 million contract. Or a worst case scenario, you play that thing out and he's a free agent the end of the next season. Paul George is still going to have 2 years on his contract at the end of next season. So you definitely are happy to do that if you're Philadelphia. So I think that might be the move. That might be Mike Dunleavy's best path to moving Jimmy Butler. Now, is that a good path? I don't think it's any good, but I don't think you have many options. I said Memphis was the other team that came to mind. But when I tried to do the trade tracker with Memphis, we were a couple $1 million off. I never could quite make it work. KCP contract, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, those are the contracts I was hoping to match. But when you try to match that with Jimmy, you're a couple $1 million off. You got to throw something else in or take something out. It's not a real way to get that done. So I don't know if you can actually make it work with Memphis, but I think that KCP contract and maybe the Brandon Clark contract, in theory, should be something Memphis should try to be coming off of. They should run up off of that. But are those role players on those contracts really going to get it done for Golden State? Nah, it's hard to sell that. But if you're bringing in a big name like Paul George on a multi-year contract that matches up with Steph Curry and Draymond Green, maybe that's an easier sell. Because that's essentially all you're trying to do is sell something. You're trying to sell something to your fans. You're trying to sell something to Steph Curry and his representatives. Hey, man, Jimmy Butler was an active basketball player with your timeline. He got hurt. What if we could turn him into another active Hall of Fame-like talent that is at least an able-bodied player right now? You know, I just, again, if you know what is real, then you shouldn't actually want to do this if you're Golden State. But I just don't think Golden State is in a position where they can really move Jimmy Butler unless it's this particular deal. That's the key. If you need to bring in able-bodied, what would you rather have for their circumstance? Jimmy Butler on a bum knee never coming back, basically? Or Paul George on a bad contract, ready to go? And if you're trying to keep Steph Curry and Draymond Green in place, keep their timeline, keep from having to tear everything down and start over again, I don't see any other way to move on from Jimmy Butler than that Paul George contract. I don't see no other way, not really. You can go for try to see if Portland's in for the Jeremy Grant move and Matisse Thybulle or something like that. But if you're Portland, you'd probably rather have Jeremy Grant and Matisse Thybulle, to be honest with you, than Jimmy Butler coming off the books. I mean, that shouldn't really be a thing if you're them, because they're not going to do anything in free agency in theory 2 years from now, and they're going to need able-bodied players. Plus, Jimmy Butler coming back from injury next season, Dame Lillard coming back from injury next season. That's a little too much. I'm not trying to bank on both of those guys returning full, strength. I'm not, if I'm Portland, willing to do that. So I don't think that's a good risk for Portland. But for Philly, You don't give a damn if Jimmy Butler comes back. You just need somebody to take that ridiculous Paul George contract off your hands. And if this will get it done, and you don't have to give away any picks, somebody who actually thinks Paul George is worth bringing into their situation, man, that's like heaven. That's a manna from heaven. That's the perfect situation if you're Philadelphia. Something like this dropping from the sky, you should be called in Golden State. Golden State shouldn't have to call you, Philly. You should be on the phone right now. Talking about, hey, man, listen, we will take Jimmy Butler. Just get this Paul George contract up out of here. And so I think Philadelphia should want to do this as bad as Golden State should, and I don't think Golden State should tell them no. I don't think so. I think both teams should be very much on board with swapping each other's trash. I think, in fact, Philly should be more interested than Golden State should be. Because if Golden State knows what's good for their franchise health, they're going to do away with this timeline entirely and stop kicking this can down the road. That's what I think. They're going to stop kicking this can down the damn road and end this nonsense right now. But I think they're not going to do that. I think their mindset is elsewhere. And so this is probably the best bet in moving Jimmy Butler, if you ask me. This is probably the best thing they're going to find. Another team like Sacramento comes to mind, but I don't think Sacramento feels their best for bringing in a hurt Jimmy Butler in place of healthy players when we know damn well they're not going to necessarily have the greatest luck in free agency come next summer. You see what I'm saying? Or the following summer. If they were to have $54 million coming off the books, what they going to end up spending it on? It ain't going to be nothing great. Unlike Philadelphia, who has Maxey in place, who already has Embiid on a bad contract that's going to be more difficult to move, who got VJ Edgecombe as two pieces that can carry whatever they have, at least to the playoffs, and more so a need to remove Paul George so they can have the flexibility to add to what it is that's already potentially a winner 2 years from now. VJ Edgecombe, year 3, Tyrese Maxey, year whatever, still an all-star level player. You want $54 million coming off your books come 2027, 2028 if you're Philly. You definitely don't want to have to pay Paul George that year for another 2-3 years as the contract continues to increase. And so, like, for Philly, it makes all the sense in the world. For the Kings, not really. They should probably be wanting to rebuild. They don't necessarily need a hurt Jimmy Butler, $54 million coming off the books 2 summers from now. That doesn't move them. So I say Memphis, but not the urgency to have 54 coming off the books several summers from now probably ain't there either. Philly's the one. Philly is the one, man. If this is the chance for Philadelphia to come off that Paul George contract, they need to take it. They need to take it and run. This is a blessing from the sky above for Golden State to have this circumstance fall in their lap. And for the Golden State Warriors, if you're going to be ornery as to not reset your situation like you're supposed to, this seems like a good con to sell your fans and say, hey, we got Paul George. We're keeping Steph Curry. We're keeping Draymond Green. Let's go forward into the future. And we get to keep Steph. None of us actually think we're going to win a championship, but we can keep Steph. That's what you're selling San Francisco. So, yeah, that's what I think, man. Another team that comes to mind is like Milwaukee, but see, Milwaukee's circumstances is that they also need able-bodied players right now to keep Giannis in place. They don't necessarily need a hurt player who's going to be expiring 2 years from now. 2 years from now, Giannis could be gone too. So that doesn't make much sense for them. They may have a bunch of trash that they would love to move that ultimately makes it reasonable for them to take back a hurt Jimmy Butler and instead. But I don't think the circumstances line up to make much sense for them for what their objectives are as a franchise. If they were trying to clean up their books and pivot from the timeline, maybe an expiring $54 million contract next summer makes a lot of sense. But they're trying to do what Golden State's trying to do. They're trying to keep somebody, and they're trying to sell a lie, is essentially what I'm saying to you. A lie that they can actually win. We know damn well they can't. So for them, it probably makes more sense for them to take back Paul George than it would be for them to take back Jimmy Butler under these circumstances. So yeah, that's just, it don't make sense for Milwaukee. Although I do think they have some stuff they should be willing to move. The Clippers, the thing about the Clippers in their situation is a little different because Kawhi Leonard was just playing like an MVP player, so you don't necessarily move him to Golden State for a hurt Jimmy Butler. If he were playing like trash, if he didn't look good this season and you need to move the contract, it may be something the Clippers would be willing to do. But I think it's lateral if you're the Golden State Warriors to bring back a hurt Kawhi, because the whole point is to bring back a healthy body who's ready to go. You see what I'm saying? So if you're going to be doing that, Kawhi Leonard is a horrible investment. And the way Kawhi's playing, that's not an even exchange. So I don't think the Clippers have really any incentive to do that at all. And you see what I'm saying? So when you look at it, you say, okay, well, there's not too many situations where this makes sense. Just trade a Jimmy Butler's, hurt Jimmy Butler, who's not going to be playing for another year, for really too many teams other than Philadelphia. Or dare I say any teams other than Philadelphia. Because the rest of the teams have better stuff to where it's not going to make sense to trade it unless Golden State's willing to add picks. You see what I'm saying? If I'm, say, Toronto and I'm ready to move quickly and RJ or something like that, for example, well, quickly and RJ are able-bodied players in their prime. If I'm going to be taking back Jimmy Butler, him expiring 2 years from now is not enticing to me as him, as you say, giving me a pick or two. As to which, if I'm Golden State, I'm not necessarily that interested in doing that, maybe. I don't think Golden State would be willing to do that. But if they want to expand their options, that's the way to do it. You have to add stuff to Jimmy in order to get teams to want to play ball. And I just don't think you have to do that if you're willing to take back Paul George's bad contract. If you keep your picks in hand. So that's the thing. If Golden State wants to add picks, yeah, they can expand their options a lot. I think there'll be much more teams who are willing to take back a hurt Jimmy Butler that expires 2 years from now for exchange for some able-bodied stuff, maybe. But I think that's what it's going to be required to give up picks. And I think those picks, for their circumstance, if they want to move them, could be better used in a different deal. But then again, if you're going to bring back such a terrible asset as Paul George's contract, maybe it equates to you giving up picks in value any damn way. If you make a move elsewhere instead of making the Paul George move, where you give up picks and bring back able-bodied tradable assets. You tell me. I don't know. I ain't did the full math on that. But I do think Paul George's contract is likely going to cost you to move it once you get it to you, which is why it can't be moved from Philadelphia unless something like this happens. This is why the urgency for Philadelphia to move Paul George, because they ain't going to be able to get rid of that thing unless they attach picks to it. You see what I'm saying? So you be very careful not to ignore that aspect of it if you're going to bring that contract to you, if you're Golden State. Because it is arguably the worst contract in basketball. So that's what comes to mind. I think about, Zach LaVine's contract, for example. Sacramento once again. DeMar DeRozan, although I think he's playing a little too well for that to make any sense. But again, I would kind of, if I'm Sac, rather just hold on to what I have than to bring myself a player that can't play right now, who may not come back the same, who I may not be able to get anything out of until next All-Star break. You know what I'm saying? For Sacramento, I don't know if that makes any sense at all. I don't think it does. Just so you can move on from a player like Zach LaVine, who's actually playing ball right now. Like, he's healthy, he's ready to go. And his contract probably ends at the same time as Jimmy's. That just doesn't make any sense. So as I've done a little preliminary homework on this, I think the only real team that should be willing to do this is Philadelphia with the Paul George contract and adding like Eric Gordon to make the contract match. I think it's like a $2 million, something like that. Eric Gordon should get it done. And if I'm Golden State, if I'm Mike Dunleavy, I might be enticed to do that. if I have control over Golden State, I'm giving the finger to this timeline. I'm trading everything for picks. I'm trading Steph Curry for picks if I'm Golden State while I still can. Legacy be damned. Thank you. Bye. You see what I'm saying? And I'm starting over. That's how I think. I don't do any of this. Oh, legacy. Oh, he's my legacy guy. I ain't doing none of that. Now, granted, this is rich coming from a Kobe fan who did all of that, but I also know how we suffered for many years and needed LeBron James to save us from more suffering for doing that. Was Kobe worth it? Of course, to us, especially if we see how everything played out. Of course, Kobe was worth it to us. Maybe this, to Golden State, Steph Curry's equivalent. I ain't going to argue with that. But I know what hell they're going to go through for letting him retire in their uniform and not getting nothing for him. I know what they're going to go through. And I'm telling you, it sucks. It sucks to high hell. And you ain't got LeBron coming to Golden State. You ain't no LeBron coming there. You know what I'm saying? You don't have that Laker lore in Golden State that's going to make somebody say, you know what? I'm just going to leave where I'm at and choose Golden State as a means of just starting over. I can assure you Golden State is not that place. I can assure you they're not. So that's really what it comes down to. If I'm San Francisco, I'm thinking along the lines of accepting the fact that I'm gonna have to move on from Steph Curry and doing it now, trading him for picks while everybody still would be willing to move picks for him, because you only got about 5 more minutes of that. Or I'm doing something stupid like this and bringing myself Paul George and Jimmy Butler stead as a means of slapping bullcrap together and hoping people love what it looks like. So that's why I think Mike Dunleavy will do this, because Mike Dunleavy's not that great of a GM. And I've been on his head since he was hired. I think he's been trashed since he was hired. So if I'm him, someone that I don't think makes great decisions, I'm going to go ahead and trade Jimmy Butler for Paul George and Eric Gordon. And I'm bringing those win now guys to my situation. I'm slapping them together. I'm giving them 40 minutes a night, and we'll go probably be 500. But Steph Curry stays in uniform. Oh, that is absolute garbage, low key. But it is an option, and it may be their only option if they just have to move on from Jimmy Butler. So I don't know if they're going to do that. They probably shouldn't. But if you're Philadelphia, you definitely try to make it so that happens. Philly needs to do this now. I'd throw in a couple second-round picks to assure it gets done. Yo, I'll give you 2-3 second-round picks on top of Jimmy Butler coming my way if you'll take this Paul George anchor off of my team. It is so important that Philadelphia move on from this contract right now if it's at all possible. Because the older he gets, the more ridiculous that contract is going to be on your books. And the more likely you're going to have to trade Joel Embiid to create any type of flexibility to build around Maxey and Edgecomb. At least Embiid is still showing that he may not play any back-to-backs, but when he does play, he's going to drop 30. He's going to drop 35. He's still very capable of scoring a lot. Paul George is a role player, making almost $60 million for the next 4 years. You need to move that contract. BDL 44, I thank you all for watching. I'm out.